still waiting. I believe we are still waiting for Director Gibbs. Is that correct, Madam Secretary?
Yes, it looks like he has yet to join us.
We'll wait another minute or so. We have a full agenda today, so I won't wait too long. All right, I'd prefer to go ahead and start the meeting, and hopefully Director Gibbs will join us. I know we have a quorum, so let's go ahead and get started. With that, then the regular board meeting of the Santa Clarita Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency is called to order. We start our meetings at the agency with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to ask that you rise at this time as you are able to join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. There are a few announcements I'd like to make before we get started. This meeting is being conducted pursuant to the provisions of Assembly Bill 361. Board and staff, I'd like to ask that to avoid feedback, echoing, and background noise, please mute all your devices until you are ready to speak. Make sure you unmute to speak and remute when finished. All board members, please turn on your cameras during the meeting. Staff, please turn on your cameras when speaking and turn them off when finished. Board members will use the raise hand feature in Zoom when action and discussion items are presented. I will call on you when it is your turn to speak. The public may comment on agenda items during item 1.3 or may do so at the time each item is considered. Speakers will be limited to 3 minutes per comment. To participate in public comment from your computer, tablet, or smartphone, please raise your Zoom hand when I announce the agenda item you wish to speak on. You will be notified when it is your turn to speak. Please unmute when requested. To participate in public comment via phone, when I announce the agenda item you wish to speak on, dial *9 to raise your hand. Phone participants will be called on by the last 2 digits of their phone number. When it is your turn to speak, dial *6 to unmute. When you are finished with your public comment, staff will remute you. Please be familiar with the last 2 digits of your phone number. Remember, that's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. We will use the following procedure for approving items and taking public comments. I will introduce each agenda item, then ask for staff's presentation. I will then ask for public comments. I will ask for questions or discussion from board members, and please remember to raise your hand. The board may then ask additional questions and discuss further, including asking for additional public comment. Once an item is concluded, I will ask for a motion and a second on action items. After any further discussion, the board secretary will call for roll call votes. PowerPoint presentations shown today may be viewed tomorrow on the Santa Clarita Valley GSA website. Secretary Kang, at this time, I would like to ask that you call the roll.
When I call your name, please respond by saying present. Director Atkins,
Present.
Director Biden,
Present.
Director Cooper,
Present.
Director Gibbs,
Present.
Vice President Gutzeit,
Present.
Director Martin,
Present.
President Natoli.
Present.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Very good. Thank you. We're moving on to item 1.3, public comments. Ms. Kang, do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
There is no public comment at this time.
Very well, thank you. Item 1.4 is for approval of the agenda. This is a voting item. Don't have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved, Director Cooper.
Thank you. And a second?
Second,
Second, Atkins.
You need whomever you'd like to pick, whether it's Director Goodside or Director Atkins. I'm
I
not
believe
sure.
I heard Vice President Goodside first.
I believe so. Thank you. And could we have a roll call vote on that, please, then?
When I call your name, please state your vote. Director Atkins,
Yes.
Director Biden,
Abstain, not present.
Director Cooper,
Yes.
Director Gibbs,
Yes.
Vice President Goodside,
Yes.
Director Martin,
Yes.
President Natoli.
Aye.
Thank you. The agenda is approved.
All right, thank you. Now we're moving on to the special procedures part of the agenda, item 2.1. This is a voting item. I'd like to turn this over to our counselor, Mr. Bunn.
You're muted, Tom.
That's twice in one day already. This is the item based on AB 361 to enable this meeting and future meetings to be done remotely. As you'll recall, you passed a resolution that allowed that to happen upon making two findings. One was that there's a continued state of emergency and you've re-examined that state of emergency. And the other one was that state and local officials continue to recommend social distancing. Both of those are true in this case, so it's appropriate to go ahead and do that. That authorization will be valid for the next 30 days. I expect that our next meeting will be more than 30 days after that, which means that we'll have to adopt that motion again. And that is the reason that it's put at the beginning of this meeting to be able to hold today's meeting remotely.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Bunn. Do we have any public comment for this item, Ms. Kang?
We do not have public comment.
Right. Is there any board discussion? Hearing none and seeing no hands raised. Secretary Kang, could I call on you for the roll call vote, please?
May I have a motion and a second before we go on a vote?
That would be important. Thank you for keeping us in line. Do we have a motion for approving the continuation of remote meetings?
Motion.
That was Director Bryden.
Second, Atkins.
Thank you, Director Atkins. Let's have the vote now.
When I call your name, please state your vote. Director Atkins,
Yes.
Director Biden,
Yes.
Director Cooper,
No.
Director Gibbs,
No.
Vice President Goodside,
Yes.
Director Martin,
No.
Vice President Natoli.
I'll go by my name. Aye.
This item passes.
Thank you. I actually had expected a request for an amending motion on this, which is, I was a little surprised, especially from Director Atkins, not to hear a motion to revise it. I know that in the past, Director Atkins and a few of the other members had been hesitant to vote for the emergency call. So I was a little surprised on that, but I think that's why there were the no votes for the special procedures continuation. Let's move on to item 3. This is the approval of the consent calendar. The only thing on the consent calendar is our minutes from our November 23rd meeting. Do we have any public comment on this item, Ms. Kang?
There is no public comment.
Very well. If there's no discussion from the board, could I have a motion to approve the minutes from November 23rd, 2021?
Martin moves approval.
Director Gibbs, second.
Thank you. Could we have the roll call vote, please, Madam Secretary?
When I call your name, please state your vote. Director Atkins,
Yes.
Dr. Biden,
Yes.
Dr. Cooper,
Yes.
Dr. Gibbs,
Yes.
Vice President Gutzeit,
Abstain.
Director Martin,
Yes.
President Natoli.
Aye.
Thank you. This item has passed.
Very well. Now we're moving on to item 4.1, discussion and or action item. The board of directors of the Santa Clarita Valley GSA is holding a public hearing today to consider adoption of the Santa Clara River Valley East Groundwater Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Plan. From now on, I will be referring to that as the GSP. Today's public hearing will be organized as follows. First, staff will make a presentation summarizing the content of the GSP. Because this is a public hearing, there will be no board member questions or comments until after the public comment has concluded. Second, staff will respond to written comments received on the public draft of the GSP. And third, members of the public will be invited to make verbal comments. With that, I'm going to open the public hearing and turn to Mr. Viergoots for your presentation, please. Rick, if you are speaking, we cannot hear you. I believe you are still muted. That's the camera.
Thank you.
There you go. Thank you.
I appreciate that, President Natoli. Sorry for that little glitch. I can't seem to get away with one of these virtual presentations without a glitch on the PowerPoint, but we're back now. It's a pleasure to see you all today. We have a relatively brief presentation for your board. And just before we get going, I just want to tell your board thank you. And this has been a big team effort for all of us, including your board and the staff, the consultant team, and stakeholders. And with that, I will jump right into it. So we've shared this stair-step graphic with your board before. We've gone up these stair steps over the last couple of years during the heart of GSP development. We're finally here at board adoption, your board's consideration, of course. All in all, the development of the GSP took about 3 years, dating back to creation of the scope of work, request for proposals, consultant selections, and then starting around 2 years ago, really digging deep with stakeholder engagement, which Tara will talk about today. The final GSP is here today. Though it is near the end of the year, this should not surprise any of us. We've been describing that the GSP development and ultimate adoption by your board would come towards the end of this year. And we are here now, which is great. And with that, Tara, I'm going to turn these over to you. And I can just index the slides when you either holler at me to do so or when I feel the time is right.
This is a very choreographed effort.
Yes, clearly.
So just to kind of give you a timeline on all of the little outreach components that we've had moving forward. So in June 2017, the GSA was formed. There were a number of things that had to be done in order to form that GSA. As we know, we had to submit. And that led us to in September 2019, so 2 years later, creating the public engagement plan and development. And that's been implemented throughout this entire time. We'll get into a little bit more detail in that. Then 60 days before actually 60 days prior to December, when we originally were going to have the public hearing, but definitely far before 60 days from today, we had the public comment period and received a ton of feedback, which was great. And we've incorporated or addressed all of that feedback. And then we finalized the GSP hopefully today. And then over the next 20 years, we'll be implementing that GSP. And the current sustainability horizon is in 2042. So this sort of takes us all the way through that time, but we'll be looking at and updating the GSP as needed throughout that time period through a series of evaluations as Rick continues on this path, maybe 20 years from now. We'll see. Let's go ahead and move on, Rick. To go over the outreach requirements for Sigma, Sigma requires that we encourage active involvement. So we need to make sure that we're hitting diverse cultural and economic elements. So DACs must be hit, obviously, so the disadvantaged communities, as well as those who are impacted. We try to reach every and any kind of person that may be impacted by this plan. We did that through a number of ways. We're going to get through all of that. We also need to consider the interest of all beneficial uses and users. So looking at pumpers, environmental impacts, businesses, people at large, kind of that whole series of groups of peoples and stakeholders. And then we need to also create and use an interested persons list. So we had a e-blast sign up on the website. And then in addition, anyone who said they were interested, we made sure to note and send them the information. We sent public notices to those key stakeholders in advance of adopting or amending this GSP. So adopting it, because we haven't really had time to amend it yet. And we explained on many ongoing ways how interested parties can get involved. And then we also have to include a communication section in the GSP, which of course we've done, as you've been able to review. Next. So this is and I'm going to say plus, an emphasis on the plus years of public outreach. This is a long time that I've been with you guys. We've done a stakeholder advisory committee process prior to the 6 public workshops, the 17 stakeholder advisory committee meetings, and then the 60-day comment period. So just really kind of giving you a large scale scope of everything that we've done. And now let's keep going. We're going to just pound through these. We've done press releases, digital print ads, flyers, e-blasts, newsletters, social media, frequently asked questions, videos, website content. So just a huge amount. Like, this is just to really help you understand the scope and scale of the amount of outreach that has been done. The flyers were delivered to DAC communities prior to the main 2 board hearings, or the meeting in November 23rd, and then today's public hearing. We also did that email list that I was talking about. We got feedback forums on every single workshop, government to government communication, board meetings, online resource center, plus the meeting reports, the meeting recordings, the topic videos, the handouts, and the feedback form for every single workshop. And then in addition, we had the stakeholder advisory committee, which we felt like went really well. We solicited applications back in September of 2019. Then we selected, originally, we were only going to select 5 members, but that became expanded to the 7 members of small, medium, and large groundwater pumpers, the business community, the environmental interests, and the community at large. So it expanded based on the needs of the stakeholder advisory committee because it just really impacted people passionately. And so we wanted to make sure to include their opinions throughout the process. And that includes the 17 meetings we put together in order to establish what public materials might look like, and then also the feedback from that previous workshop, in addition to the actual workshop. So stakeholder advisory committee members were asked to come to each of the workshops as they could, but provide input on the materials that were presented, and then also provide feedback on how they were presented, if they'd heard anything from their stakeholders, and then tell us that feedback as well. So 292 people came to the workshops. Now, this does include not necessarily 292 individuals, but that's if we count all the people who attended, 292 is the total. Of course, some people came anonymously because we didn't want to track people's names. But I do have the list of anyone, and that's also been recorded. Total questions. So we had 69 questions throughout those meetings. And then we also received 9 forms. That all of that feedback is in the feedback report. And that's part of what's been addressed into the plan. The workshop topics were the hydrological conceptual model, the local ecosystems and groundwater surface water connection, water budget development, sustainable management criteria, had several different open workshops, and then the project management actions and the draft GSP review. So we did some stakeholder advisory committee meetings specifically on the sustainable management criteria because it was such a critical nexus point between kind of how we're going to move ahead and what we're going to measure the success of this groundwater sustainability plan going forward. So we really wanted to make sure we had stakeholder advisory committee consensus as much as we could to move forward in a way that was clear for the board. Then we had the board meeting November 23rd, which was, again, we reached out with press release information on the SCV-GSA website, social media posts, emails, the digital print ads, and then the printed handout delivered to businesses, communities within the identified disadvantaged communities. So we created a list and of the disadvantaged community areas. We actually had a map created by the other Rick V. And you leverage that map in order to reach all of those businesses and communities. So mobile home parks, the community center, the library, etc. And all of that's in your board memo. All right, next.
I switched it, Tara.
Oh, you switched it? And it's not switched on my screen.
Oh, okay.
Is it switched on anyone else's screen, or is it just mine that it's listed today's public? Oh, today's public hearing. Sorry, it's just that we did the same amount of work, Rick. So it's reading at the same time. So for today's public hearing, we did the same number of things as we did for the November 23rd, because each of these meetings is incredibly important to reach as many people as possible. So again, we mailed to the key stakeholders the public hearing information. We put out the newspaper ad, press release information on the SCV-GSA website, the social media posts, again, and then emails to the GSA contact list. We did a series of digital and print ads in Signal starting at the beginning of December to really highlight, kind of really making sure people knew by January 3rd, it's January 3rd. We know that the holidays are a tricky time to communicate, so we made sure to reach out both before and after Christmas to make sure people knew about today. And then, so just kind of giving you this is like a snapshot of everything that's been done. So there were 292 public workshop attendees, as we saw, 69 Facebook comments or feedback and comments, so questions and plan feedback. At least one per workshop, so at least 6 went out, and then they were published in a minimum of 3 outlets at a time. So that would, and then in the social media, we actually got over 100,000 impressions and 900 engagements. So though sometimes we wish more people would actually come, they were definitely engaged. And then email open rates. So we got workshop 1, 25%. By the 6th workshop, we were at 32%. So it kind of crept up in terms of the open rates. And then finally, website views were 2,149. And then nearly 1.5 million digital ad impressions. And then 2 ads per workshop at 11,000 circulation rate for the print ads and the signal. So really big numbers. As we move forward, we'll need to continue some ongoing communication outreach during the implementation phase of the groundwater sustainability plan, which is another really exciting piece because you will have done this successfully. And then we need to continue to reach out and make sure everyone's notified on what's going on, what's happening, and how we're continuing to move forward. Thank you so much, Rick.
Yeah, of course, Tara. Thank you too. It's a good summary and a good reminder of all the work that we did with outreach. And towards the end of today's presentation, we'll talk about public comment that we've received and to kind of round this out. But let's jump into the plan right now. So as your board is aware, the plan has built on past studies in the basin. We didn't start from ground zero. There were a number of studies already in the basin that we used, including important work on the geology and basin conditions, monitoring data from multiple sources. We developed a sustainability goal with the help from stakeholders to help guide development of the criteria and the key important items for the plan development. There were a ton of new studies performed. Tara mentioned some of these during her presentation, but the hydrogeologic conceptual model, that was actually a 2-part report that looked at groundwater elevations and water quality. We did a historical and a future water budget that considered climate change. We also updated the groundwater flow model and had that peer reviewed. The flow model was instrumental for groundwater budgets and developing the sustainable management criteria. And a whole host of other efforts, which we've shared with your board in the past. So with GSP implementation, we're going to continue to do new monitoring and additional study, such as related to groundwater dependent ecosystems, land subsidence, sustainable management criteria. The studies continue, the analysis continues. Number of benefits for implementing the plan is your board is aware. Certainly, it's a way to transparently share with your board, stakeholders, the Department of Water Resources, the sustainability of the basin, and track it against the criteria. That's also a great opportunity with your board, future board meetings for people to learn more about the groundwater sustainability in the basin. And annual reporting will continue or will begin, and it will continue throughout this process. The first annual report that will describe the basin metrics, water levels, et cetera, is due to the Department of Water Resources April 1st. So that will be an effort that is picking up pretty quickly here. With the sustainability goal, we developed this goal. We as in the basin developed the goal with input from stakeholders. Here it is again. It's longer than just what you see here, but this is the crux of it. The goal goes on in a little bit more detail in the plan to talk about how we're going to get there and some of the measures that will be taken. But big picture, the plan achieves this sustainability goal. Key concepts. These are long-term planning documents. Our local GSP here in the Santa Clara River Basin, it maintains sustainability, and it also has processes to identify if undesirable results are going to potentially occur and to address those through management actions. The state has told us that these plans have to include 6 sustainability indicators shown here on your screen. We have put an asterisk by seawater intrusion simply because we're so far inland that the seawater intrusion sustainability criteria doesn't apply here. Brief trip down memory lane here with the historic water budget. The basin hasn't always been in the condition it's been in since, say, the 80s. In the 50s, the groundwater elevations were lower. Agricultural groundwater use was higher then and through the 60s, but agricultural groundwater use began to decline as urbanization began to take place in the valley. In 1980, state water project water began to be imported. Water reclamation plant discharges began to be a larger factor in the river. Roughly 20,000 acre feet of water is discharged to the river from the water reclamation plant every year. The river system reflects that. There are parts of the river that are very wet, that have a lot of habitat. Other parts of the river have a lot of invasive species like arundo. Groundwater levels historically have varied quite a bit through periods of wet cycles, dry cycles, etc. I'm going to do a brief review of the sustainable management criteria. We shared this with your board at a previous meeting, and I thought I would do this just to let you know where we've made some clarifications. We've made no changes to the chronic lowering of water level criteria. Essentially, we have a minimum threshold here based on lowest future groundwater elevation or lowest historic groundwater elevation. If we go beyond that, if we go lower than that in 25% of the wells in the alluvium or 50% in the Saugus, then we would be tracking that. If it happened over a 3-year period, then an undesirable result would have taken place. If it looks like that will happen, then we will manage the basin to avoid that. Similarly, with chronic reduction in storage, we've made no clarifications to this. It uses the same approach for the chronic lowering of water levels. This one has an additional component of an undesirable result being an inability to meet groundwater demands during a multi-year drought. So again, the basin needs to be managed to allow us to do that. Land subsidence. We've talked about this in the past. We did make some changes to this to clarify that we would be measuring land surface elevations 2 times a year, starting in June, and that the undesirable results, these are unchanged, but the undesirable results would be no more than an average of 1/10 of a foot of subsidence in any single year, or 1/2 foot in any 5-year period. Avoiding degraded groundwater quality. This is largely unchanged. We did correct a typo, and we also corrected a section here where we had failed to include the number of representative wells that would be effective. So now we have referenced that 20% of the wells would need to be affected to have an undesirable result. In the depletion of interconnected surface water criteria, there were a number of changes made to this. But these were described to your board on November 23rd. But I'll review those briefly. So the depletion of interconnected surface water is the criteria where we avoid depletion, but we also consider groundwater dependent ecosystems. We clarified this in the final plan to reflect that we would also consider native fishes and pools, not just surface flow and the UTS. We also clarified in the plan that GDE evaluations would be performed ahead of reaching the triggers, or if we reach the triggers. There were some concerns with stakeholders that we might not have enough time built in, and so we've clarified the plan in that regard. Minimum threshold for depletion is measured by the groundwater levels falling beneath the lowest predicted future groundwater elevation at monitoring wells, at the GDE monitoring wells. We have the special GDE evaluation process built into the criteria as well. And we've talked about that. We talked about that a lot on our November 23rd meeting. Potential undesirable results. Certainly a permanent loss or significant degradation of native or aquatic habitat due to groundwater pumping would be an undesirable result. We've broadened this, as I mentioned a moment ago, to include not only the unarmored three-spine stickleback, but the native fishes, and not only cessation of surface flow, but also pools. As we've talked about in the past, there is an evaluation process that will take place if we approach or reach these triggers. Oh. It has 6 steps. We will communicate to your board what we find in the evaluation. If it appears that undesirable results to the groundwater dependent ecosystems are anticipated, we'll consult with groundwater pumpers to implement management actions. And this is valley-wide, and of course, including the municipal entities, to redistribute pumping and or increase imported water, water conservation, et cetera. And we will monitor the recovery of water level and the habitat during that process. Now, let's look towards the future. With the implementation of the plan, we find that groundwater levels will be in long-term balance. They'll be lower in some periods. Dry weather river flow will be lower in some cases. Wet weather storm flow will largely be maintained, but the timing of it will be different in the future, and that's because we've rolled in climate change factors. Despite these, there will be ongoing monitoring as part of the GSP implementation. We'll be filling data gaps over time. We'll be reporting the basin metrics to your board and the Department of Water Resources, and we'll be revising the plan in the future as we learn more. The future conditions, as I mentioned earlier, are consistent with the sustainability goal, which was stakeholder developed. Let's talk a little bit about schedule. Data gaps, as I mentioned, we'll be working on those second quarter through third, 2023. We do plan to enter the river and start installing piezometers later this month or in February. Monitoring, reporting, and outreach. Tara mentioned this. This will continue through GSP implementation. Similarly, with promoting best water use practices and reporting to the Department of Water Resources. Again, we'll continue in April and move through the future. Fiscal considerations, we have budgeted this for this fiscal year and next. This is included in the GSA's budget, which was adopted in June. Let's talk a little bit about public comment and the availability of the GSP. Get a drink of water here. So the GSP in Appendix O includes an updated table of public comment and responses. This is an updated table from what we shared with your board on November 23rd. We had a good discussion November 23rd on the table. We've only made a couple changes to it. And so we're just going to do a high-level summary again of that table. Also note that Appendix O in the draft GSP doesn't currently include the public comment letters that go with this table, though they were uploaded with the documents, they weren't put in the right place. So we plan to include the public comment letters that accompany Appendix O in the final GSP, and we'll talk again with your board. We'll mention that on item 4.2. So these are the public commenters that made comment during the 60-day public comment period. And consistent with our last presentation to your board, we looked at a lot of the common denominators and prepared a table to summarize the key points with you. So here are some of the common themes with these comments. Groundwater dependent ecosystems, triggers, are they set right? Are they not set right? What about upland GDEs? What about oaks? Historical conditions, water reclamation plant flows. At our November meeting with your board, we had a long discussion about the triggers. We also talked about the historic conditions, and we introduced new information using the NDVI satellite imagery data. The GSP does have a plan to evaluate upland GDEs as well. And we also clarified the GDE or the GSP regarding water reclamation plant flows. Climate change models, some commenters suggested we also use an extreme wet or use an extreme wet and a dry model. We used what we felt was a more reasonable climate change model. We didn't use the most extreme model, but we have mentioned to your board, and we'll mention it again, that if we determine that the climate change model we've used is not the best one, we can look at revising the climate change analysis in a future GSP. Domestic wells, depths. What are the depths? What do we know about extraction volumes? What do we know about water quality? We updated the draft or the final GSP to reflect this with some additional figures and discussion. Similarly, with monitoring wells, we had a comment about well condition. What are we going to do if a well doesn't provide meaningful monitoring data? The short answer is the well would either need to be rehabbed or replaced. And we'll know that as we do the annual monitoring for the GSP. Subsidence, we've clarified past and future monitoring for subsidence. There were some technical corrections made to the appendix as well on subsidence. There's support for Arundel removal, high five to that. The GSP also includes that's a effort that would be supported by the GSA. Tom, do you have a moment to speak on public trust and human right to water?
Sure.
Thank you.
The public trust is mostly on the interconnected streams. Public trust extends to streams and to groundwater to the extent that it affects navigable streams. And we believe that we've addressed the public trust issues in the existing draft of the GSP, so no significant changes were made there. As to human right to water, those focused, as you see, on depths and extraction and water quality, and also on the disadvantaged communities. And Ms. Bravo has talked about the outreach that we made to the disadvantaged communities. We don't have all the data from domestic wells where particularly these things come into play, but there will be a future gap filling effort on those wells, and that those will address those disadvantaged communities. We also determined that the disadvantaged communities are being served already by SCV water, with the exception, I guess, of one which is about to be served. The line has been constructed to them. So the quality of their water is the same quality that everyone else gets at SCV water. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, overall, we feel like we've done a very good job responding to the public comment. There is a large table in the final GSP that goes into more details with that. Since our November 23rd meeting, we've received one additional public comment, which I'll share with you here. This came in via email today from Mr. Mandel. It is a comment. It's not so much a question, of course. The commenter's point, though, is really one, in my opinion, pointing towards land use planning and urban planning, not so much the groundwater sustainability plan, but from the groundwater sustainability plan perspective, it did utilize groundwater planning scenarios utilized in the basin's urban water management plan. And it found that the basin would be managed sustainably, but it also says monitoring is needed. And if it looks like undesirable results are a concern or are imminent, there are management actions currently in the groundwater sustainability plan to address those. And President Natoli, this concludes the staff presentation.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Virgutz, and thank you, Ms. Bravo, for contributing to that presentation. What I'd like to do now is open up public comment on the GSP. A reminder to those of you who are making your public comment here on item 4.1, there will be a 3-minute time limit. There are no group presentations and there is no ceding of time. Just a few additional housekeeping items I'd like to go over. Speakers will be called in the order the request to speak was received. Before you begin speaking, please just state your name for the record. We would appreciate that. When the board secretary calls your name or the last 2 digits of your phone number, please remember to unmute yourself and begin your public comment. Staff and board members will not respond to questions or comments during the public comment portion of the public hearing. There will be an opportunity for staff and board members to address issues raised during public comment at the conclusion of agenda item 4.2. Secretary Kang, will you please call the speakers?
One moment, please. Ms. Planbeck, when you're ready, you may begin your public comment.
Hi, this is Lynn Planbeck, and as you know, I'm an alternative member of this board. So on behalf of the whole process here, I would like to just make 2 statements. One is that I was sorry to see this meeting held on January 3rd. Many people are not even back from vacation yet. I know that Tara said she made a really big effort to notice it over the holidays and make sure people knew it was today, but it was very difficult, I think, for some people. And secondly, I have to say that I am really appalled that the public comments were not provided to the board members. The public comments were extensive. They were well documented. They were well researched. They had a number of, they had quite substantial background information to back up their concerns, and yet the board didn't read them. I'm just appalled. I'm just appalled. That's all I have to say. And I don't think this board should approve anything until it has read the public comments. That's all. Thank you.
Ms. Fortner, you may begin your public comment.
Hi, thanks. Stacy Fortner here. I want to echo Ms. Plambeck on the public comments. That was very alarming to me. And as soon as I heard that, I was hoping that that Rick would at least take a question on giving an explanation of why the board members have not received all of the public comment. I know that there were several people that wrote letters that, took the time out of their days to reflect and respond to, requests and or not requests, but their responses to this plan. And I guess I'm not understanding why it would just be summarized or filtered or somehow condensed down into topics and subject matter without reading all of the public comments. It just doesn't seem like it's fair to the public. I mean, they took the time to do this, and the least you could do is take the time to read it and provide it to the board members. So that's very, very disturbing and alarming. I don't know why that wouldn't have happened. I had another point here, but I'll just leave it at that. That's pretty extensive. I'm pretty disappointed as well. Thanks so much.
There appears to be no other further public comment at this time.
All right, seeing no others wish to speak, I now close the public hearing for item 4.1. I'd like to move on to item 4.2. Turn this over to Mr. Viergoots for the introduction of the item, and I want to make sure that everyone understands there will be board discussion and comment on the comments from item 4.1 here in item 4.2. So Mr. Viergoots, please proceed with item 4.2.
Thank you, President Tolley. We have a resolution in front of your board today, and I will open up the PowerPoint here. It's open, but it's not displaying again. My apologies. Okay. So the item today is consideration of the resolution and discussion of the item. I believe, President Nicoli, you called for did you also call for a description of or a response to the public comment provided at this point?
There will be board discussion, and yes, I'd like staff to comment on the comments received from the public during item 4.1.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that clarification. So, as you know, this has been prepared for board consideration following a 3-year GSP development process. We've had additional opportunity today to discuss the GSP. And our plan is to discuss this with your board. Of course, our recommendation is to incorporate the public comment letters into Appendix O and also to adopt the attached resolution. I think this is the right time just to talk about those public comment letters for Appendix O. Those were provided as part of the November 23rd board meeting. So they are out there and they were previously provided to your board.
Did you have anything else, Mr. Virgutz?
No, I don't, President Natoli.
All right, let me ask the other directors to see if they have any comments. If you do, fellow directors, please raise your hand. Vice President Gutzeit, please go ahead. You're muted.
You know, you'd think we'd learn that by now.
I know.
It's the holidays. I lost my touch there with the Zoom. This board meeting packet also had a bunch of letters in it. So for anybody that didn't see it then, it also came last week with our board packets so we could review it. That's it.
Thank you. Any of the other directors have any questions or comments? Don't see any. So let's see, Director Atkins, please proceed.
And I think Mr. Cooper would like to say something. I just have one comment. It's a question more or less for Mr. Virgutz. When you were talking about groundwater dependent ecosystems, you talked about pools. And if I'm not mistaken, the majority of pools in that drainage are all wastewater discharge related. There might be some natural pools, but that's only after significant rain events, and then it percolates in pretty quickly. Is that a fair assessment, or am I misreading what you said?
Thank you, Director Atkins. Earlier in November, December, our biologist was in the field looking at the river and observed some pools that were present. And that's why we added that text. And our biologist is on the line if we need to talk with him as well. Or Jeff, perhaps you have some other input on this.
Yeah, I'd be happy to add to it, and Tom Barnes is certainly available. So Director Atkins, the pools that we're talking about really are formed by shallow groundwater when it's close to the riverbed, okay? And so they're little scour areas, rocky areas, places where the fish hold up during low flow periods when there's not a lot of direct flow in the river. And so it's where we see groundwaters expressed at the surface. And those are the pools that we're most concerned about in that particular area, just upstream of the I-5 bridge.
And that is, if I'm not mistaken, that's relatively prime UTS habitat. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's why we were concerned. UTS and native fishes.
I'd like I'd like to, if there's anything the biologists would like to add, I'd like to hear that technical opinion as well, if possible.
Sure. If Tom Barnes here, if I may address the board, thanks. Appreciate being asked the question. I think that Jeff and Rick characterized it correctly. We wanted to make sure that when we were talking about flow cessation, that it wasn't a cubic feet per second measurement, but that if there was a standing pool that was sustained by an upwelling groundwater, it may look still, but it is quite important to the habitat. And so it was a clarification really of hydrodynamics, just to make sure that we didn't disregard standing water that is actually an expression of underground flow and surface expression. So that was the reason for the clarification.
Thank you. I wanted to make sure that was made public. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Atkins. Director Cooper.
Thank you, President Natoli. I just have a couple of comments that I want to make. One of them is to, of course, Rick and his group, but to Tara, is the amount of outreach that went out in this program for the last 3 years has been amazing. When you read through the report, and she just gave an overview today, but when you go through the report and look at all of the things that were done and how many hits they got back in Instagram, and well, they didn't do TikTok, but Instagram and Facebook and all of the others, it was huge. And I really appreciate that. And as far as, the meeting being held today, staff did an amazing job of advertising that. Every time I went on KHTS's website and every time I looked at the signal, everything that I got, it was always in front of me of January 3rd is SCV-GSA meeting to adopt the plan. And so it's been out there for a long time. And so people have an opportunity to participate in this and come in on it today, even if they're out of town. It's all through Zoom for a while anyway. And the other is, I want to thank Rick and his staff that he works with in putting this together. This has been an amazing process, something that was brand new throughout the state, not an easy one. And everybody had to do it throughout the whole state at the same time, looking for the same groups of consultants and technical expertise. And it's taken 3 years to put it together, but it's going to have long-term effect on this valley in maintaining groundwater sustainability. Our valley has always been well managed. It'll be continued to be well managed, but even better, now it's going to take into consideration the ecosystems that overlie the groundwater basins. So I thank you, and I thank you for the work that you've done in this. And with that, if I could, I would make a motion to adopt staff resolution to adopt SCV-GSP plan. Thank you.
We'll hold your motion for a few more comments, Director Cooper.
Okay.
Vice President Goodside, go ahead. Muted.
I caught that. I forgot to mention, but speaking of comments, if anybody wants an interesting read, I am very glad that we did the peer review process, and I found the summary of those comments and our responses to that to be a terrific double check on the work that was done. And so I know there was some question way back when we were doing budget, whether we needed peer review or not. But I also wanted to acknowledge there was extensive comments there that were incorporated in many cases and responded to in all cases. So, and I echo the thanks of the other board members for the tremendous process of the staff and consultants.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Goodside. We have another request for comments by Director Martin.
Thank you, President Natoli, and I'd also like to add my words of appreciation to Rick and his team and Joe. Listen, we may say 3 years has been the time we've taken to put the plan together, but if we go prior to that, there were several years of of introducing this new agency to the Santa Clara Valley, and Tara was involved in all of that. And so the effort, the public outreach effort, as Director Cooper has said, has been pretty substantial. And I doubt if anyone can say they were blindsided by any of the information that's in the report. We put together a team of the best professional minds we have in the industry to put this plan together. We've complied with the DWR requirements. Yes, we've had public comments. And by the way, I appreciate the clarification that the public comments were provided to the board as opposed to what was said earlier. That's not an unusual thing to happen. People say things that really aren't true. So I appreciate that that was clarified. And I just want to thank Rick. I thanked him in the past, but the effort that was put in to put this plan together was, I'm not even sure how you describe it, a 3-year effort to put a plan together, 3 years prior to that to put the agency together. And all in all, we're going to take another step forward in protecting our groundwater supply. It has always been protected through probably a less intense program, but this now will provide the metrics and other criteria to make sure that we continue to have a sustainable groundwater supply. And with that, my hat's off to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I will definitely support the motion.
Thank you, Director Martin. I do have, I don't see any other board members with their hands up. I do have a question for staff and then a couple of comments of my own. First, and I'm not sure if Mr. Berry or Mr. Virgutz is the best person to answer this, but it's a question about the climate change aspect of our models. How often would that be updated and rerun? So if we get new information, how would we know? When would that be new information plugged into a model and rerun? How often would we do that?
Jeff, why don't you take that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think that's a great question, especially in light of this last drought. We're not sure it's over. We hope it is, but may not be. So actually, the GSA can undertake an update of that model and evaluation of more extreme climate factors at any point in time. What I believe DWR is expecting is that every 5 years, there would be an update of the GSP. And at that time, you would probably update the model. You would check the calibration of the water levels that you would predict versus what was measured. You would evaluate the responses, the timing of responses that were predicted versus measured, and make adjustments to the model at that time. You could also, at that point in time, use more aggressive climate change factors if you felt that was necessary. So you could do it at any point, but certainly at the 5-year mark is when you would probably more than likely do it, when you're updating the GSP.
Very good. That makes sense. I still have a couple of concerns myself about the minimum thresholds and the GDEs with our undesirable results. But what I'm expecting is that we'll be getting ongoing reports from staff at our quarterly meetings. And when we get the updates for the annual review that goes to DWR, about how those guesses on our triggers and our thresholds are doing with respect to what's actually happening on the ground. So I'm taking a hopeful but let's verify approach to those, and hoping that we can catch anything sooner rather than later. I also wanted to comment on Ms. Plambeck and Ms. Fortner's concerns about the public comments and reassure you that I read pages and pages, and I'm sure the other directors did as well, pages and pages of Excel spreadsheets with all of the comments listed. And I, in fact, made comments and had questions on some of staff's answers to those public comments that were received, pages and pages of it, which staff has subsequently addressed. So it was a lot of work. I think there was just a misunderstanding about what was said during the presentation. today that what we were getting was just a summary, and it is true. We saw everything. In fact, we just got an email today with an additional comment by a gentleman named Corder. So we've read everything that's been submitted up until this morning. If something came in a little bit later, I think that's why it was included in the PowerPoint presentation for us this afternoon. But otherwise, we have read everything. I will tell you that we have. Now to some comments that I have on staff's work and the consultants' work over this time period. This has been a stunning amount of work, and it's amazing amount of work, and it's very technical work, and that it was done in really a relatively short period of time goes to show you what we can do when we have very short time limits imposed by the state. Maybe not necessarily what we would prefer to do, but it does certainly motivate you to get a job done. And I think in this case, that it's a job well done. I really want to thank Mr. Cole and Mr. Marks and Mr. Veergoots and Ms. Kang and Ms. Martin for all of the hard work that they have done over the past 5.5 years to put this agency together, put this board together, run the meetings, exceptionally well-run meetings. I will tell you, I've been presenting to the Board of Supervisors and California Coastal Commission for 21 years, and these meetings have always been exceptionally well-run, whether it's virtually or in person. I've always appreciated staff's honest approach to the questions and the issues raised by members of the board and members of the public, and your approach to try and find a solution for those questions and concerns. I found it interesting as I was watching the presentation today, seeing Ms. Bravo going through the outreach metrics and thinking to myself, okay, this is 2042 is the time when we're supposed to have all of this set in stone, and fortunately we're sustainable, but if we weren't, we'd have till 2042. And I thought, I wonder what the metrics will be in 2042. And while I may not be here to hear Ms. Bravo's presentation in 2042, maybe some of the rest of you will be. And Tara, I'm sure you have nothing better to do over the next 20 years than do some outreach work for the Groundwater Sustainability Agency here. And I will echo Director Cooper that I have been a planner who has done community plans and significant outreach, and the amount of work that Ms. Bravo and her team have done on this is staggering. They have done an awful lot of amount of work, and I thank them very much for their efforts, Herculean efforts over the past several years. So with that, I would ask Director Cooper, does your motion still stand?
Yes, it does. I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution GSA 2022-01.
Very well. Do we have a second?
Second, Atkins.
We have a second. Ms. Kang, will you please call the roll?
When I call your name, please state your vote. Director Atkins,
Yes.
Director Blyden,
Yes.
Director Cooper,
Yes.
Director Gibbs,
Yes.
Vice President Gutzeit,
Yes.
Director Martin,
Yes.
President Natoli.
Aye.
Thank you. The GSA resolution number 2022-1 is approved.
Folks, I think we all just a round of applause for this, everyone, the public, the staff, the board, everyone. This is a great effort, and I can't wait for us to get this to the state and have them see what a great job we did. Phew. With that, let's move on to item 4.3, authorization for some GSA letters of support for some grant applications. Mr. Veergoots, please proceed.
Thank you, President Natoli. Item 4.3 is pretty self-explanatory. We have on occasion had member agencies approach the GSA for letters of support. We talked with your board in November about one such letter Since that time, there was another letter that was sought and ultimately signed by President Natoli. We're asking that your board both ratify that letter and also discuss and designate the board president with authority to sign such letters in the future as they're needed. And that's it.
Thank you. But before I have a comment and move on, I just want to warn everyone that this is the day that my gardener comes. So there might be loud noise in the background, and also my dog may not like that he's around, so we may hear from her as well. I do have a suggestion. I'd like to add a third recommendation to this, and that be that such actions be reported to the board at the first following board meeting with such letters included in the board packet. That's not in the motion. I just want to make sure that anything is just included in the board packet. It could even be just an information item, just reporting to the board that the request was made, and because of time constraints, the president signed the letter and sent it on. So if we could just see the letter and just be informed if it comes up, just that it's in there, that those letters should be included in the next board packet.
Understood.
Very well. So is there any public comment on item 4.3, Ms. King?
There is no public comment.
Very good. Is there any board discussion?
Hold on one second. Looks like we do have one. Well,
One public comment?
yes, we do.
All right, let's go ahead to that.
Ms. Cattell, whenever you're ready.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for a very informative process. This is the first time I've ever seen so much community outreach and education on a proposal like this. What I would like to suggest is when you have letters that the chair would be signing, have you ever thought of sending the letter out before you sign it to the board members and getting an email vote of approval? Of course, it would still show up in the next board meeting, but that way everyone on the board would be up to date on what is going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cattell, and I'm sure Mr. Bunn will correct me, as I'm not a lawyer and do not play one on television or on Zoom, but that would be considered a violation of the Brown Act, I believe, because to have the board vote or consider an item, we would have to have a public hearing to do that. So I believe, and there'd be basically a chain meeting if we did it by email, which is also not allowed under the Brown Act. But Mr. Bunn, if you could comment whether I'm way off base or if I'm kind of close with that.
That's absolutely correct, Madam President.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bunn. So I guess over the years, I have absorbed something in my board hearings and Brown Act training. So Ms. Cattell, while it might make sense to do that, the Brown Act does not allow us to publicly, as a group, consider an item unless it's considered in a public hearing. So I think that's why after the fact, let's just at least make sure that, although I am thinking of something, perhaps at one of our future board meetings, Mr. Viergoots and Mr. Bunn, we should consider an item where we perhaps develop a procedure for notification of the board, or some criteria under which the president could sign a letter. For instance, in this case, the letter that I signed was almost just change the names, similar to the letter that we considered at our November 23rd board meeting. But perhaps if we had some criteria laying out when the board president would be able to do that, we could have a discussion on it in public and perhaps make it a little more clear to the public as well. Vice President Gutzeit, do you have a comment on that?
Yes, and I unmuted before I started talking. Third time's the charm. I was going to say exactly what you said and add that SCV Water had, and certainly going way back, Newhall Water had policies or guidelines that would allow this type of approval. And then if it was anything controversial, it would have to wait. But I do agree with you that if there was some guidelines established, that would be a good thing, because I'm sure, and there's my dogs, I'm sure there could be lots of letter requests coming in, and some guidance would be good.
I appreciate that. That's good to know. Are there any other comments by members of the board? All right, seeing none, could we have a motion for authorization of the letter of support for the grant application?
So moved, Atkins.
Second, Martin.
Thank you.
Madam
Director.
President,
Yes,
it's not
yes.
clear whether the motions include your third suggestion.
Yes,
It does. Each one should, each such authorization should be followed in the next meeting as a presentation to the board.
very good. Thank you for paying attention to that, Mr. Bunn, and thank you, Director Atkins. And do we have a second to the amended motion? Or to the motion?
I'll second it, Martin.
Thank you, Director Martin. Great. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
When I call your name, please state your vote. Director Atkins,
Yes.
Director Biden,
Yeah, it's slow on the mute. Yes.
Director Cooper,
Yes.
Director Gibbs,
Yes.
Vice President Gutzeit,
Yes.
Director Martin,
Yes.
President Natoli.
Aye.
Thank you. Item 4.3 is approved with the amendment.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to item 4.4, an information item. Mr. Cole, could we get an update on Bouquet Canyon Creek?
Certainly. Thank you, President Atoli, board members. And thank you for the accolades earlier. I was keeping offline to keep it streamlined. So, and I just want to thank the board specifically too for their efforts and the public and their engagement in this process. You know, I've been doing this for a little while now, and this was, I would say, the largest outreach and participation effort that I've experienced through my career. So kudos to everybody involved. Huge milestone, but as we all know, this is the next step in a process that will continue. So look forward to the future engagement as we move forward. Bouquet Creek, just a brief update on it. I think I reported to this board at the last meeting. We were able to participate in a field tour, which was a great opportunity to go out and put boots on the ground and see Bouquet Creek. You know, I recommend everybody do that. Again, it is an amazing resource that needs some help. And I think it becomes really obvious when you go out there and look at it. It could become, again, a huge community asset. I think that's where you're seeing our support try to move that along. And I'm happy to report that the principal stakeholders have a meeting that is scheduled this week, Thursday, to really try and reinvigorate the process and getting it to move forward. So that's the main thing I wanted to report, is that meeting will take place. I'll be able to report out of that what direction things are trying to head. The one other thing that I will mention is that I'm sure you all saw in the review of the GSP, we did include a specific project that identifies Bouquet Creek restoration as a GSA worthy endeavor. So that is in there. I think that could potentially really help with pursuing grant funding, which this project is going to need, I think, to finalize. So that's what I have to report. Happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Cole. Are there any public comments, Ms. Kang?
There is no public comment.
All right, and do any members of the board have any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item 5. Appointment of the board
I
president.
think Director Atkins had.
Oh,
his
yep,
hand
there
up.
it
Came up late.
There we go. I didn't see it. Sorry. Director Atkins, please.
That's okay. Thank you, Steve. Looking forward and excited about this stakeholder meeting later this week, and really anxious to hear the outcome. And how do you think? I mean, are the prospects for grant money high? Do you think that these particular types of projects line up well with the, say, for example, federal grant money and so on? I want to have this board understand what the prospects are.
Yeah, certainly. I think this project specifically can hit kind of all cylinders. It's a water supply benefit. It's an environmental habitat restoration benefit. It's a road safety improvement benefit. So yeah, I really think, if we can get the stakeholders focused on what the project is and moving it forward, I do think that there should be significant funds that could potentially be attained from this, both at the state and federal level.
Is there wildfire suppression grant money available as well, possibly?
Yeah, that's my understanding, both at state and federal level, that's another kind of pillar that's out there, is helping with fire abatement.
So it has multiple wins, and I truly appreciate the effort you've put in so far, and really looking forward to the next report. Thank you.
As am I. Yep. Thank you.
All right, very good. Do not see any other hands raised. Item 5, you again, Mr. Cole, appointment of the board president and vice president for the 2022 year term.
Yes, thank you, President Natoli. In your board packet, you'll probably remember we had quite the robust discussion about how to set up terms the last time around. I think that's made it easier this time around, but we'll see. There's a table that's included in that proposed kind of succession of the leadership. The next up was to basically promote Vice President Goodsite to board president. And then Director Biden was up for vice president. And I think, the basic language of how that laid out was, as long as the person didn't decline, then that would be the next in line. So that's what's proposed. Vice President Goodsite would be president, and Director Biden would be vice president. And all I can say is, man, does time move quickly. So President Natoli, thank you for your efforts over this last year. It's been tremendous, and Vice President Goodsite as well. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And does that occur today, or does that occur in April, the switchover? I was assuming it occurs in April.
Mr. Bunn, help me remind me on the timing, please.
Well, I
Since it-
believe it's effective now, but the next meeting will be April. So that's when the chair will take the chair for the first time.
Okay, maybe we should clarify that, because if it was effective today, then one of the first things we should have done is transfer from me to the new president. So, because then the new president should have run today's meeting.
Well, it would be, for example, if you got a approval of a grant request between now and April, that would go to the new president. But today's meeting was the prior board.
Okay, so
And
So,
we did, President Tully, we structured it that way on the agenda to run through the consistency of the first meeting. It does fall kind of right at the first of the year, but the agenda was set up purposefully so that the next person in line would take leadership after today's meeting.
okay. Does that mean, Mr. Bunn, that I close the meeting today, or does the new president close the meeting today?
Well, I'm not sure there's a requirement either way. It might have some symbolic meaning to pass the gavel. So you can go ahead and do that.
All right. First, is there any public comment for this item? Public comment will take first, Director Atkins, if there is any.
There is no public comment.
Very good. Then I will, I suppose I will pass the gavel. I'll have my gavel here for my regional planning
Well,
meeting.
I think we have to vote.
Madam President, yeah, you haven't voted yet.
But I thought there was no action required on this item.
Well, the recommendation would be that the Board of Directors appoint, although I think that Mr. Cole was correct that the anticipation was unless one of them declined, it would be appointed. So I think that can be up to you, but I think you should ask each candidate whether they're willing to serve. And then
Okay,
if
so-
you want to pass the gavel, that's fine.
Well, let's ask first. Vice President Gutzeit, are you willing to become president for the next term of the GSA?
Yes, I'm willing.
Great. And Director Bryden, are you willing to become vice president of the GSA for the next term?
I too am willing.
Very well. With that, then, I pass the gavel to President Gutzeit. Yeah, I go this way. Actually, I have to go opposite in the camera.
Well, thank you. I know Director Atkins and Director Martin had something to say. I didn't want to.
Which you can call
jump the gun. Okay, if I have the imaginary gavel, I'll go ahead with Director Atkins, whose hand I saw first.
I'm a bit of a loss here. Normally, under my understanding of Robert's rules, when you're electing your leadership on a board, that actually has to require a vote. But if I guess by acclamation, that's fine. It was unusual, and I'm fine with it. I suppose we'll just go along with it. That's all.
Mr. President Gutzeit, if I may respond.
Yes, please.
My thought in saying that could be done without a vote is that the vote already took place a year ago. And President Natoli was just implementing the results of that vote.
That is a good clarification because it is a bit confusing.
Thank you.
Director Martin, did you have a?
Yes, President Gutzeit. I wanted to thank former President Natoli for her efforts in this most important year of adopting the GSP. I think you did a wonderful job, and I thank you for that. And I thank former Vice President Gutzeit, now President Gutzeit, for her efforts in supporting former President Natoli. So I'm looking forward to another good year for the GSP, and just wanted to let you know how much I appreciate your efforts.
Thank you. And I'll flow. Let's see, do we need to do? See, I'm rusty still. I will just add on to your comments and say, I appreciate, we already talked about the staff and everything, but thank you for the board also, and for the huge learning curve that everybody had on this. That I view the education of the public and the community on these important issues as one of the big achievements of the sustainability plan. And I hope we continue that going forward. And we all have more work to do on that coming up in the future. So I look forward to serving as your next president and seeing what comes up next. And with that, I will ask if we have any director requests for future agenda items. I see no. Go ahead, Director Atkins.
Please just keep updating us on Bouquet Creek. I want to be sure it's on the agenda as we follow up with that stakeholder meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other requests for future agenda items? Seeing none, I will state that we are adjourning this first SCV-GSA board meeting of 2022. Happy New Year, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Happy New
everybody.
Year. God bless.
Happy
Thanks,
New
everybody.
Year.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Congratulations, y'all.
Look
Thank
forward to
you.
seeing
Happy
you
New
guys in
Year.
person one of these days.
Thanks.
One of these
Yes.
days, yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.